Today I'm going to talk about the sadistic married couple of Fred and Rose West that in the 90s they were arrested for the unaliving of 12 young girls and women, including the abuse of their own children over a 20-year period. What seemed like an ordinary married couple turned into a killing spree that shocked the nation and the people that knew them the most. In the 1990s, a police investigation in Gloucester, England, uncovered one of the most disturbing criminal cases in British history. What began as an inquiry into a missing girl would eventually reveal a series of crimes that shocked the entire country and turned an ordinary house into one of Britain's most infamous addresses. No one could believe such a normal couple would commit such horrific crimes like this. Well, to the outside, Fred and Rose West appeared to be a normal couple. It absolutely shocked the entire country. They were responsible for unaliving multiple young women and girls between 1967 and 1987, including their own 16-year-old daughter, Heather West, and Fred's 8-year-old stepdaughter, Charmaine West. The other victims were Tennant Shirley Robinson, Alison Chambers, Teresa Siegenthaler, Shirley Hubbard, Lucy Partington, Joanna Mott, Linda Goff, Carol Ann Cooper, Catherine Rena Costello, and Anne McFall. The crimes were greater than anyone suspected. Police searched the house looking for missing Heather because the kids told social workers and police they were threatened as a joke by their parents that if they don't behave, they will end up like Heather in the back garden under the patio. So the police, upon hearing this, checked it out. The kids were placed in foster care following horrific allegations of severe child abuse and incest. When the police checked out the property, they found remains at the home of 25 Cromwell Street, which is where Fred and Rose West lived, in Gloucestershire. The press named the House of Horrors, and the public were horrified by the crimes and how they happened over a long period. No one could believe that a normal house is no different than a house in the street that everyone walks past every day. No one could believe what was happening behind closed doors for so long, and the people that knew them were really shocked because, like I said, they just seemed like an ordinary married couple who had children. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It took ages for police to uncover it. People wondered how it was undetected for so long. Neighbours said they lived an ordinary life, and it was quiet life. Nothing seemed totally out of the ordinary. They just seemed like a normal family. Everyone was shocked by their crimes. Like I said, no one could believe it. It was just completely, they just didn't come across the type of people that would commit crimes like this. Everyone in the area found it unusual that a married couple were capable of crimes like this. It captured media attention, not just in England, but all over the world. The investigation uncovered multiple murders spanning many years, making it one of the most notorious criminal cases in modern British history. When police searched the house at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester, they found human remains buried on the property. The discoveries received enormous media coverage and shocked the public. 25 Cromwell Street was where they lived, in a nice street. No one had any issues. Everyone seemed to get along. All the neighbours seemed to get along. The fact that both Fred and Rose West were implicated together made the case unusual and attracted widespread attention. Many people were stunned that the crimes had allegedly continued over a long period before the full extent was uncovered. This made the case especially disturbing and led to intense public interest and scrutiny. Fred West had a troubled background, or so he said, or so he says. He was born in 1941 in rural Gloucestershire. He grew up in a large farming family. He claimed he was essayed as a child, but his surviving family members have denied this. He left school at a young age and worked in manual jobs, including construction. He had a history of criminal behaviour before meeting Rose. His family think that because he had a motorcycle accident when he was 17 years old and he hit his head, this was the cause of why Fred turned out the way he was. He fractured his skull when he fell off his bike. Rose West, growing up, she had a very troubled childhood. She was born Rosemary Letts in 1953 in Devon. She grew up in a troubled family environment. She was severely and repeatedly abused as a child by her father. She started to show abusive behaviour herself by early teenage years. By the age of 13, she started abusing and molesting her younger brothers. Her upbringing was marked by extreme trauma and family dysfunction. She left school as a teenager. She left school as a teenager, and not long after leaving school, she met Fred, while still in her teens. Fred met Rose in 1969 in Cheltenham, England. Rose was about 15 years old at the time, and Fred was significantly a lot older at the age of 27. They began dating, and not long later, they began a relationship and later married in 1972. Rose moved into Fred's home and became involved they started a family, and he became involved in raising his children from an earlier relationship. The couple had several children together. To outsiders, they often appeared to be an ordinary family living in Gloucester. Friends and neighbours of the family and visitors generally saw a normal household, although some people later reported concerns about the family and the environment. They did not appear to fit the public's image of notorious criminals. Fred worked as a builder and labourer. The family lived in an ordinary terraced house. Many people were shocked when the investigation revealed what had been happening behind closed doors. Fred and Rose eventually settled in Gloucester and lived at 25 Cromwell Street. The house became the family home for many years. They raised children there and appeared to be living an ordinary life from the outside. The house was a typical terraced house in a residential street. Nothing about the property would have suggested it would later become one of Britain's most famous crime scenes. Friends and neighbours and visitors came and went over the years. When people later looked back at the case, some reported things that happened that seemed unusual, including young women and girls occasionally staying at the house, family members making allegations of the abuse, and concerns were raised by some people who had spent time around the family. Children sometimes appearing neglected or troubled from Fred and Rose West's it was their children that appeared troubled and neglected. Many of these concerns were not fully understood or investigated at the time, but obviously as time gone on, the police have obviously realised they made a mistake, and social workers obviously realised they made a mistake because there was so much abuse going on at the time, including things like incest, which is actually unbelievable. As the years passed, some young women connected to the West disappeared. They disappeared without trace. No one knew where they were, what happened to them. Families obviously didn't know where they were either. The explanations were often given for why people had left or moved away. Questions were occasionally raised, but the full picture did not emerge until much later. It wasn't until the police investigation in the 1990s that many pieces of the puzzle began to come together. Over a number of years, several young women and girls connected to Fred and Rose West disappeared. Some were family members, while others were young women who had lived with and worked or spent time with the Wests. In many cases, friends and relatives were given explanations about why the person was no longer around. At the time, these disappearances were not linked together. It was only years later, during the police investigation, that investigators began connecting the cases and looking for evidence. Investigators noticed a pattern involving vulnerable young women and girls. As more evidence emerged, police realised the case was much larger than they had first believed. The investigation eventually expanded beyond a single missing person inquiry. What triggered the investigation is in the early 1990s, concerns were raised about the disappearance of the West's daughter Heather. Questions about her whereabouts led police to take a closer look at the family. As officers interviewed family members and examined past allegations, suspicions began to grow. Statements and family members and witnesses raised concerns, and investigators found inconsistencies in explanations about Heather's disappearance. Police decided the case needed a much deeper investigation, so they decided to search 25 Cromwell Street, where the Wests lived. In February 1994, police obtained a warrant to search the address. What started as an investigation into one missing person quickly became something much larger. During the search, officers discovered evidence that suggested serious crimes had taken place. Detectives began re-examining disappearances connected to the Wests, and more witnesses came forward. The investigation grew into one of the largest murder inquiries Britain had seen at the time. In February 1994, police began searching 25 Cromwell Street as part of the investigation into Heather Watts' disappearance. Initially, detectives were looking for evidence relating to Heather. As the search continued, investigators uncovered evidence that suggested the case was much larger than a missing person inquiry. The search expanded, and forensic teams spent months examining the property. During the excavation of the house and garden, police discovered human remains. Further searches of the property revealed additional remains connected to multiple victims. The discoveries confirmed detectives' fears that serious crimes had taken place at the property. The investigation widened dramatically as police worked to identify victims and establish what may have happened. News of the discoveries quickly spread across Britain. The case dominated newspaper headlines and television news. Many people were shocked that such crimes could have remained hidden for so long, and residents of Gloucester found it difficult to believe that such events had taken place in an ordinary residential street. The house became known throughout the country as the House of Horrors. Fred West was arrested as evidence was uncovered during the searches of Cromwell Street. He was arrested in February 1994. He was questioned by detectives as the investigations expanded. Over the following months, more evidence was gathered, linking him to multiple unalivings. As detectives continued their inquiries, attention also turned to Rose West. She was arrested in April 1994. Investigators examined witness statements, forensic evidence, and the couple's history. Both Fred and Rose West faced charges connected to multiple unalivings. The case became one of the largest and most closely followed criminal investigations in Britain. Prosecutors prepared extensive evidence for future court proceedings. Fred West, after being charged, was held on remand awaiting trial. In January 1995, before the trial began, he died in prison by suicide. Because of his death, he was never tried in court. Rose, the case against her, continued. Her trial began in 1995 and attracted huge media attention across Britain. Prosecutors presented evidence from the police investigation, witness testimony, and forensic findings. The trial lasted several weeks. In November 1995, the jury found Rose West guilty of multiple unalivings. She received a life sentence and a whole life order, which means she'll never be released and remains in prison. Today, she is one of a few women in British history to be told she will spend the rest of her life behind bars without the possibility of parole. The trial was one of the most closely followed criminal prosecutions in modern British history. Newspaper and television covered developments daily. The case continued to shock the world and the public because of the scale of the crimes and the number of victims involved. The case had a devastating and lasting effect on the victims' families. Many relatives spent years seeking answers about what had happened to their loved ones. The investigation brought some answers, but for many families, the impact never disappeared. After the investigation, 25 Cromwell Street became one of the most infamous addresses in Britain. The property was eventually demolished in 1996. Today, there is no trace of the house itself. The case led to questions about missed warning signs and whether earlier intervention might have prevented further crimes. It remains a significant case study in criminal investigation and safeguarding. The case continues to be the subject of books, documentaries, and discussions decades later. It is often cited as one of the most notorious criminal cases in modern British history. The name West remains widely recognised because of the scale of the investigation and the public reaction at the time. The case of Fred and Rose West remains a really shocking crime to this day. What began as questions surrounding a missing family member eventually uncovered a series of crimes that shocked the nation and led to one of the largest murder investigations the country has ever seen. Decades later, the case is still remembered because of its impact on the victims' families, the scale of the investigation and the questions it raised about missed warning signs and safeguarding. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, let me know your thoughts in the comments and feel free to suggest other cases you'd like to see covered on the channel.